Ding dong, mother scratches. Welcome to Flip Classroom, our lecture on the Philosophes and the Enlightenment. So, what we're going to do right now is going to kind of explain the Enlightenment, and we're going to break down some of the Enlightenment ideas, Enlightenment thinkers that we've been talking about this week in class. So, in your table of contents, you want Philosophes chart, and it would be 827 or 828:18, depending on what day you had history this week. So let's jump right into it. And in your notes, you have a graphic organizer. You have this little blue oval up at the top. And we talked a lot about this idea this week of the scientific revolution. So you want to put that up top in that blue oval. As you notice, that blue oval is going to be connected to a red oval, which is another historical age that's going to come out of the scientific revolution. So at the top, we've got the scientific revolution taking place really in the mid 1500s. And the whole idea behind the scientific revolution was that people could use observation and experimentation, meaning their reason, their logic, to understand the universe, the laws that govern nature, the world around them. So, in other words, this scientific method started to replace superstition and blind faith. And we always talk about, of course, Isaac Newton, Galileo, Copernicus, people like this in Europe that were experimenting and collecting data and just trying to understand through the use of science how the world worked. Before the scientific revolution, people were expected to believe what the church and what the kings told them as the absolute truth. Scientific revolution brought about the notion of questioning everything. Question, don't just accept, but question. All right, so this is going to lead to the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment is very similar to the scientific revolution, but also different. So it's going to occur slightly after the scientific revolution, and it basically says, listen, if we can use reason and logic to understand our natural world and the universe, why not use reason and logic to solve social, economic, and political problems here on Earth? So is it natural that one man, a king, rules over an entire society? And does it make sense that God would give that one man absolute authority? This is not logical. This is not reasonable. Therefore, we need to question it. That's the idea of the Enlightenment. So scientific revolution focuses more on understanding the world, the physical world. The Enlightenment focuses on things like government, people's rights, the social structure, religion, economics. So a big tenet behind the Enlightenment is to improve people's lives here on Earth. And I always say a poster child for the scientific revolution would be Galileo. He's a good example of a person in the scientific revolution attempting to understand the world. And of course, with the Enlightenment, you've got these philosophes. It is French, and it looks like philosopher, but a philosophe was simply a French thinker who believed the use of reason and logic could help to improve society and life here on this earth. Okay, so that's the Enlightenment. Now, these philosophes, there's quite a few of them. You see the baby there because I said so. That would definitely illustrate the ideas of the age of absolutism. Just accept it because I said so. Big shift in thinking with the Enlightenment. It was your responsibility as a citizen is to question authority. Don't accept things that the church and the monarchy tells you as the truth. Question it. Question everything. Going back to the philosophes. So there's quite a few of them. We have a little chart here. So it's important that you really focus on the philosophe and their philosophy. So I tried my best to kind of organize this so it makes sense to you, and we kind of go chronologically. So the first philosophes that we're going to talk about were not from France; they were from England. We got Thomas Hobbes, wrote a book called The Leviathan, and he is again from England or Britain. And basically, Hobbes is different. He says that all of us are born cruel, greedy, and selfish. We are naturally bad. And because we're bad, we can't be trusted with freedom. So we need a strong government, an absolute monarchy to assure law and order. And since Thomas Hobbes is so undemocratic, I always tell my students the one way you can remember Hobbes is we hate Hobbes. His last name begins with the H, so we just say we hate Hobbes because Hobbes is not like us. We're democratic people. Hobbes was more of a monarchist. He believed in absolute monarchy to keep people in line. Now, his opposite would have been John Locke, also from England. And John Locke's big book is Two Treatises on Government, and you can see his ideas in the right column. So unlike Hobbes, Locke says, no, we're good. We're born good. And through some education and guidance, we can take care of ourselves. We can basically make our own decisions in society. We don't need a king or a ruler to tell us what to do. In fact, what makes us equal is our natural rights. He says all of us are born equal in our rights. We have life, liberty, and property as our natural rights. And the government is not there to keep us in line. The government's actual function is to protect those natural rights. And if they don't protect those natural rights, we, the people, have the right to overthrow an unjust government. Should sound very familiar to you because those words are in our Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson borrowed those words. Okay, the next guy, I call him the rock star of the Enlightenment. He is from France, where everything is breaking down. That's like the capital of the Enlightenment, Paris, France. Voltaire is going to be very important within the Enlightenment because these two freedoms are part of our Constitution, First Amendment rights. First of all, he believes strongly in religious tolerance, that no government should place one religion above another, that citizens have the right to choose their own religion, or maybe not choose. Maybe they don't want to belong to a religion. That's up to them. But that's called religious tolerance. He had seen a lot of religious violence in his day, and he believed that intolerance was the cause of a lot of bloodshed and war. His other big idea was freedom of speech. And you've heard me say this in class. I do not agree with what you have to say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. He spoke out against all forms of intolerance and prejudice and bigotry. He was strongly against slavery, and he was imprisoned in the Bastille, which was a dungeon in Paris, twice, and exiled from France to England for his writings and for his protests. Okay, we got Montesquieu, looks like mosquito, another Frenchman, and his book, The Spirit of the Laws. His idea we're very familiar with, and that is that no man is to be trusted with absolute power. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Therefore, power should always be divided into different branches. I always tell my students that Montesquieu looks like a mosquito, and mosquitoes tend to live in the woods. Woods have trees, and trees have branches. So when you think of Montesquieu, you think of those branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. Okay, Rousseau sounds like a Frenchman. He's actually from Switzerland. His book was The Social Contract. And basically he says that laws should not be derived from the king, but laws should come from the general will of the people, what the people want. And we would call that direct democracy. He also says that the good of the community should be placed above people's selfish interests. So laws should reflect what's good for most of the community. And again, this kind of goes back to democracy. So when you think of Rousseau, I want you to think of democracy and our own system, our own form of government. Okay, we got 3 left, and the next thinker is, his name is pronounced Denis Diderot. Sometimes people like to pronounce that T, but it's Diderot, not Diderot. And that's the encyclopedia. So Diderot, he doesn't really move forward any new ideas other than he wants to change the general way of thinking. And at this time, before radio and TV and the internet, the big media is books. I mean, people are reading, and those ideas are spreading through books and also word of mouth. But he puts together the encyclopedia, which gathers writings from various Enlightenment thinkers, and his goal is to change the general way of thinking. And before long, that those encyclopedias, they find their way across the Atlantic Ocean, and you've got colonists in America, the New World, reading essays from Voltaire and Montesquieu, and they're getting these ideas, man, and they're not going to take it. They're not going to take this what they see as abuse from King George III, and then we got a revolution over here, and then of course in France you've got many of the Frenchmen who are talking about overthrowing an unjust ruler, and laws coming from the general will of the people, and these are revolutionary ideas that come out of Diderot's encyclopedia. So he's important. Okay, our only female is Mary Wollstonecraft, and Mary Wollstonecraft is English, like Locke and Hobbes. Her big book is A Vindication of the Rights of Women. And she says, listen, you guys are all hypocrites. You're talking about natural rights, you're talking about liberty and freedom, but what about women? And why is it that men could share in these rights and women are still denied these rights? We're expected to, stay at home and raise children and take care of domestic duties. So her big push is for equal education for boys and girls. And she's not like an ultra feminist. She still believes that women should be good wives and mothers, but they should have opportunities for education and places outside the household. Our last thinker is Adam Smith, which we'll get to a little bit later in the year when we start talking about things like communism and capitalism and some other economic ideas. But he basically comes up with this idea that just like there's natural laws that govern the universe, there's also natural laws that govern economics. And his big idea is something called the free market, which is run by the natural law of supply and demand. So if you have a high demand for a product, the price will be determined by that high demand. The more people want something, the more expensive it's going to be. The less demand, of course, that's going to affect the price, and that's going to go down. And also supply affects demand as well. So if we have a limited supply of oil, there's probably going to be a higher demand for it. Vice versa, if you have a big surplus of oil, then the demand would be less because there's more of a supply. I hope this helped. Study this chart, guys. These thinkers are important. They're going to be on the big boy test coming up here in a week or so. And if you have any questions, you can shoot me an email. Other than that, ding dong, mother scratches. See you in class.